All right, so welcome. We're going to be diving into a case from Bermuda using excerpts from the actual court judgment. So this has been the deep dive.
It has.
Thanks for listening.
And thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.
In this podcast, there could be mistakes, so please check the source material. Enjoy exploring and have a great day.
The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended as legal advice and should not be relied upon as such. While efforts are made to ensure accuracy, the information discussed may not reflect the most current legal developments and is subject to change. For advice on specific legal issues, consult a qualified attorney licensed in your jurisdiction. The opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of any organizations they are affiliated with. By watching this video, you acknowledge and agree to this disclaimer.
All right, let's dive into something pretty important today. Your personal data. And get this, we're going to Bermuda.
Bermuda.
Yep. You probably think of pink beaches and, all that vacation
Yeah,
stuff.
rum swizzles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they take data protection seriously, too.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We've got excerpts straight from their Personal Information Protection Act, the 2016 one. We're talking the real deal here, and we're going to break it all down for you.
Sounds interesting.
It is. So, imagine this. You're enjoying those beaches, but your digital footprint, super secure.
I like that.
Right. Okay, so Section 17 of this act, it talks about reasonable access. Sounds simple, right? But what does it actually mean for, someone in Bermuda?
Well, it means you've got the power to know exactly what an organization's got on you, what info they collected, why they have it, and who they're sharing it with.
No more mystery data.
Nope.
That's awesome. But hold on, this reasonable access thing, couldn't a company just make it super hard, like bury you in paperwork?
That's a good question. The act's really clear, though. No stonewalling. They have to respond, and they can't charge you a fortune just to see your own info.
Oh, okay.
There are some specific situations where they can refuse access, like if it harms someone else or mess with a legal case.
So it's like balanced, right?
Yeah, finding that balance.
Makes sense. But let's get specific. What about medical records? That stuff's super sensitive.
Absolutely. And the Act knows that. Section 18 dives into all that, medical and mental health stuff. It adds a bunch more protection. Like, imagine you're switching doctors.
You want your records to go with you, right?
Exactly. The Act makes sure that stuff only gets released if a healthcare pro says it won't hurt you. So, switching doctors. Covered.
Phew. I get to know. It's like knowing your most sensitive info is actually protected.
Right.
But what if they've got something wrong? Like your address, or even worse, like wrong info in your medical records. What then?
That's where rectification comes in. Section 19, you basically get to hit edit. Yeah. You can ask for a correction, and they got to act fast. But there's actually more to this section.
Ooh, I'm listening. What else is there?
Well, it gives you the power to block stuff, erase stuff, even stop them from using your data for certain things. Like all those targeted ads that follow you around online.
Wait, hold on. So if I'm in Bermuda, just browsing vacation websites, and then bam, I'm hit with a ton of timeshare ads.
You can actually do something about it.
No way.
Yeah, Bermuda says nope to that. You can tell them to stop using your data for marketing.
That's awesome.
Right. It puts you back in control.
But can't they just ignore you? What if they think they've got a good reason to keep using your data?
They can push back, but here's the thing. They have to give you a reason. And it's got to be in writing.
So no more hiding behind vague excuses.
Exactly. Transparency is key.
I like that. They got to be accountable.
Right. And speaking of accountability, this act isn't just some vague idea. It actually tells you how to make these rights happen. That's Section 20.
So no more wondering, how do I actually do this?
Exactly. It lays it all out. You make a request. They've got 45 days to respond. No dragging their feet. And they can't charge you some crazy fee just for asking to see your own data.
Wow. That's like user-friendly for a legal thing?
It is.
But what if they ignore you? Or just refuse to give you access without a good reason? Then what?
Remember that commissioner we mentioned?
Yeah.
That's where they come in. You can file a complaint if you think your rights got violated. It's like having a data protection watchdog on your side.
Okay, so it's not just about having rights on paper. There's actually a system to make it work.
Exactly.
That's a big deal. But before we move on, are there any times when these rights don't apply? Like exceptions to all this data protection awesomeness?
You're hitting on a really important point. We've been talking about all these rights, but sometimes, yeah, they can be overridden. And that's where things get a little, well, tricky.
Ooh, I knew there had to be a catch. All right, tell me more. What are these exceptions? How do they work?
Well, the biggest one is national security. It's in Section 22. Basically, it says that in certain cases, the government can, exempt organizations from some of these rules if it's a matter of national security.
So, like, if they think accessing your data is super important for national security, they can kind of bypass the protections.
Yeah, it kind of raises some eyebrows, right? It's that whole debate about individual rights versus national security, but the act doesn't just give them a free pass. There are specific procedures and limits.
Okay, so it's not just a do whatever you want situation.
Right. To use this exemption, they got to get a minimum certificate. It has to say which organization, what the purpose is, and exactly what data they can access. And it's not retroactive, so they can't suddenly demand data from 5 years ago using this.
Okay, so at least there are some rules.
Definitely.
But this minimum certificate thing, is it like top secret? Does anyone ever see it?
Well, the Act actually says it's got to describe the information and be forward-looking, so there's at least some transparency.
Okay, so it's not completely in the shadows.
Right. And if someone thinks it's being misused, they can actually appeal the decision to the Supreme Court.
So there are checks and balances.
Exactly.
That's good. So it's not just a free pass for the government. All right, we've covered a lot: access, correction, and even this national security thing. Anything else in this part of the act we should talk about?
Oh, one more important thing. Remember those communication providers, like phone companies, internet providers.
Yeah, they see everything we do online.
Exactly. They get their own section in the Act, Section 23. It's all about how they can collect, use, and share your data.
So it's not a free-for-all for them.
Nope. Just like the rest of the Act, it's all about transparency and being accountable. They got to be upfront about what they're collecting, why, and who they're sharing it with. And you, as the user, you've got the right to see it, correct it, even delete it sometimes.
This is making me think about all the data I create every day, just using my phone and the internet. It's kind of mind-blowing.
It is. But it's also good to know that there are laws trying to protect that data, even in a place as laid back as Bermuda.
Yeah, for sure. It's
Yeah.
like they're taking it seriously.
They are. It shows that data privacy isn't just a big tech issue, it's everywhere. And Bermuda's Act is a good example of how even smaller countries are stepping up to protect their people's data.
Absolutely. Okay, we've covered the basics of accessing your data and some of the key exceptions and like the nuances of the act. But now let's get into how you can actually use these rights, like step by step, how to make a request, what to expect, and what to do if things go wrong. Stay with us.
All right, so let's get down to business. Remember Section 20, that whole procedure thing?
Yeah, the step-by-step guide.
Exactly. It's your roadmap for actually using these data rights in Bermuda. It all starts with you, making a formal request to whoever's got your data.
Okay, so not just a casual email, this is the official way.
Yeah, the Act's pretty specific about how it should look. You got to clearly say who you are, exactly what info you want, and why you're asking.
So no more playing dumb on their part.
Nope. It makes you be organized, but it also protects you. They can't say, oh, we didn't understand what you meant.
I see, it keeps everyone honest.
Right. So you send the request, then what? Just sit and wait.
Yeah, what happens next?
Well, that's when the clock starts ticking. They have 45 days to respond, legally.
45 days. That's actually pretty fast for, official stuff. But are there ever, like, exceptions?
Of course. The Act's not unrealistic. They can get extensions if they need more time, like if a ton of people are making requests, or they have to talk to someone else to get all the info.
So it's not a free pass, though. They still got to have a good reason.
Right. Got to keep it transparent. Now let's talk about the money part. A lot of people worry about getting charged a bunch for just seeing their own data.
Yeah, that'd be annoying.
Right. Well, Section 9 covers that. They can charge a reasonable fee to cover their costs, but it can't be, like, crazy expensive.
So no stopping people from asking just because of the cost.
Yeah. Exactly. It's got to be fair. They shouldn't be overwhelmed by requests, but you shouldn't be priced out of your own rights.
It makes sense. But what if, even with all this, something goes wrong? Like, what if they just ignore you completely, refuse to give you the data, even without a real reason?
That's where our friend, the commissioner, comes in. Section 13, remember, you can file a complaint with them if you think your rights have been violated.
Oh, right. So there's someone to go to if things get messy.
Exactly. And remember, they got to explain why they said no in writing. No more vague excuses.
So everything's documented.
Yep. Keeps everyone on their toes. This whole process, from making the request to, like, potentially going to the commissioner, it's all about transparency and accountability. Pretty impressive for an island known for being relaxed, huh?
Yeah, they're serious about this data protection stuff.
They are. They're not just talking the talk. Now, we've talked about accessing data, fixing errors, even deleting stuff, but what if your data gets, like, mishandled? and you actually get hurt because of it.
Yeah, that's when it gets real. What about Section 21, the compensation for distress part?
Right. This section acknowledges that data breaches or misuse, it can have real-life consequences. It's not just some abstract idea.
Like imagine your identity getting stolen or your private medical records ending up online.
Exactly. This section lets you go after compensation for that harm. It makes organizations responsible for what they do or, don't do to protect your data.
So they can't just be careless and get away with it.
Right. It's a big incentive for them to take security seriously. Knowing they could have to pay up might make them think twice before cutting corners.
It's like being proactive is better than cleaning up a mess later.
Exactly. But, not every data problem ends up in court.
True.
Sometimes it's about knowing the system, knowing your rights. Like, if a company in Bermuda keeps spamming you with emails even after you've asked them to stop,
Ugh, that's the worst.
you can point them to Section 19, the part about stopping the use of your data for marketing.
So it's like knowing the rules is your weapon.
It can be. Sometimes that's all it takes for them to take you seriously. But before we wrap up this whole Bermuda thing, I have one more question about those exceptions. We talked about national security, but are there any other times when those data protection rights might not work? Ooh, good catch. You're thinking like a pro. And yeah, there's one more thing we got to talk about. It's about those communication providers again. The phone companies, internet providers, they have so much info about us.
Okay, I'm curious. What's the deal with them? Why are they different sometimes?
Well, think about it. They handle tons of data. Call records, browsing history, location data.
It's like they know everything.
It is. And that's why the Act has special rules just for them. It recognizes how important they are, but also adds extra protection to stop things from going wrong.
So even though they need our data to do their jobs, there are still limits on what they can do with it.
Exactly. They can't just give your data to anyone. There are strict rules, just like for everyone else. And if you think they've messed up, you've got the same rights access, correction, deletion, even compensation.
Okay, so even when it gets complicated, the Act tries to be fair to both sides.
It does. The goal is to have a system where everyone's protected and no one's taking advantage. It's about a digital world that's both innovative and respects our privacy.
That sounds ideal.
It is. Okay, we've covered a lot in Bermuda. Accessing your data, how to request it, the exceptions, even getting compensation if you're harmed. But, this whole deep dive is making me think.
About what?
We've been focused on Bermuda, but what about the rest of the world? What are other countries doing about data protection?
That's a good question. It can't just be Bermuda.
It's not. It's a global thing. And that's exactly what we're going to tackle next. We're going global.
Ooh.
So get ready, because we're about to take a whirlwind tour of data protection around the world.
Okay, so we've explored how Bermuda protects your data. But like we said, this isn't just a Bermuda thing. This data privacy stuff, it's global.
It really is. Your data can be zipping around the world before you even realize it. So knowing how different countries are dealing with this is super important for everyone, not just those chilling on a beach in Bermuda.
Exactly. So let's start with the big one. The EU, they have this thing called GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation.
Yeah, GDPR. Everyone's talking about it.
I know. It seems like it's everywhere, but I'm still a little fuzzy on what it actually does, beyond just the acronym.
Yeah, it can be a bit much. It started back in 2018, and it really changed things. It applies to any organization that's dealing with the data of people in the EU, no matter where that organization is located.
Wait, so even if a company is in, I don't know, Silicon Valley or something, but
Yeah.
they have data from someone in France, they still have to follow these GDPR rules.
That's the whole point. It sets a global standard. It's pushing for stronger data protection everywhere. And it's not just vague ideas. It has some really strong principles behind it.
Like what? What are the main points of GDPR?
Okay, so there's this thing called data minimization. Basically, companies should only collect the data they absolutely need, for a specific reason. Then there's purpose limitation. That data can only be used for the reason they said they collected it for, not for something random they decide later. And then there's data retention. They can't just keep data forever. They got to delete it when they don't need it anymore.
That all makes sense. It's like respect people's data. Don't just use it for whatever you want.
Exactly. And GDPR gives people a lot of control over their own data. Remember those rights we talked about in Bermuda? Access, rectification, erasure. GDPR has those too. It even has this thing called the right to be forgotten.
Right to be forgotten. That sounds kind of intense. What does that even mean?
Basically, you can ask to have your data removed from search engine results. It's like getting a fresh start online.
A digital do-over.
Yeah. Of course, there are some limits, but it's a pretty powerful tool.
Wow. But I bet following all these GDPR rules is a lot of work for companies.
Oh, yeah, it's not easy. They can't just put up a privacy policy and call it a day. They have to really change how they do things, like having strong data protection policies, checking for risks, even sometimes hiring someone specifically to make sure they're following the rules.
That's the deal.
It is. And it's setting a good example for other countries. Like Brazil now has its own data protection law, the LGPD. It's really similar to GDPR.
So GDPR is kind of starting a trend.
You could say that, but data privacy laws are still like a work in progress in a lot of places. Some countries, they barely have any laws, while others are still figuring it all out.
It's like a puzzle with all these different pieces.
Kind of, and that's why it's so important for countries to work together on this. Data moves so fast, we need a way to make these rules work together so everyone's protected no matter where they are.
So it's like a global effort.
Exactly. It's not just about protecting your own data, it's about creating a digital world that respects everyone's privacy.
It's a big challenge, but knowing your rights is a good place to start.
It is. So to everyone listening, no matter where you are, remember you have a say in how your data is used. Do your research, ask questions, and don't be afraid to use your rights.
Data privacy matters. It's a human right, not just a legal thing.
That's right. And that wraps up our deep dive into data protection. We hope you learned something new, maybe feel a little more in control of your own data now.
We went from Bermuda to global data laws. It's clear that this is a conversation that's just beginning.
So stay curious, stay informed. The more you know about your digital rights, the better prepared you'll be.
Until next time, keep exploring.
In this podcast, there could be mistakes, so please check the source material. Enjoy exploring and have a great day.